The patrol had been routine, just as Captain Henry Watrous had expected. For the past 12 hours, the UEES Cerberus had been silently gliding through the vastness of space. Watrous stood on the bridge, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the holographic map showing the usual flow of interstellar traffic. Freighters, diplomatic ships, and independent traders all moved in designated lanes, protected by the watchful eye of the United Earth Defense Fleet. Everything was calm, predictable, and boring, or so it seemed. Lieutenant Kim Carbonell sat at the sensor station, her eyes glued to the blinking screens. Suddenly, her voice broke the silence, sharp and urgent. "Sir, we've got an unknown vessel off route 20,000 clicks from trade lane Theta 7. Watrous' brow furrowed. Unknown vessel. What's its course? Carbonell quickly typed a few commands into her console. It's an old Corellian freighter. No registered flight plan. No response to automated pings. The ship is drifting off course. It's not supposed to be here. A sinking feeling washed over Watrous. Freighters drifting off course weren't uncommon, but they usually had a reason. Smuggling, avoiding customs, or maybe just technical malfunctions. But the lack of response was strange. Traders tended to avoid military zones like the plague. Smugglers might be sneaky, but they never wandered right into a patrol zone without trying to hide first. "Helm, bring us into visual range," Watrous ordered, his voice steady, but his mind racing. "Keep it quiet. We don't know what we're dealing with." The Cerberus engines hummed softly as the ship changed course, the steady pulse of the engines reverberating through the metal hull. The crew silently watched as the unknown vessel loomed on the holoscreen, growing closer. As they drew nearer, the ship's appearance became clearer. The freighter was old, worn out, and patched in places. It looked like it had seen better days. Watrous could tell from the scars on the hull that it had been in battles. The ship's engines looked battered, but still functional. Yet, despite the heavy damage, there was something about the ship that made Watrous uneasy. The freighter wasn't making any attempts to communicate, not even a simple hail. This made Watrous nervous. Was it a trap? Had someone been waiting for a chance to draw the Cerberus into an ambush? His mind raced through all the possible scenarios. "Nothing," Lieutenant Carbonell said, shaking her head as she watched the data streaming across her console. Still no response. The freighter continued to drift slowly, its engines weakly firing as if hesitating to move. Watrous felt the tension building in his chest. Something was wrong. "Keep your eyes on it," Watrous ordered, his voice low but firm. "If they try to make a run for it, we shut them down. Prepare a boarding team. We're going in." Within minutes, the Cerberus had closed the gap, coming to a stop just outside the freighter's range. The unknown ship was now in their sights, sitting dead in space like an ominous shadow. "Ready the boarding party, Commander Furlan," Watrous said, turning to the senior officer. Furlan was a seasoned veteran, one of the best leaders the fleet had. He'd been in combat more times than he could count, and his soldiers trusted him to get the job done. "Already on it, Captain," Furlan replied, his voice calm but serious. "Marines are suiting up." Watrous watched from the observation deck as Commander Furlan and his team checked their weapons, making last-minute preparations. This was standard procedure. Boarding an unknown vessel wasn't something the crew did often, but it wasn't a rare event either. Still, the situation felt off. There was a strange energy in the air, like the calm before a storm. Watrous' eyes moved back to the freighter. It was so quiet now, the kind of silence that felt unnatural. He couldn't shake the feeling that the ship was hiding something. "Shuttle's ready," Furlan's voice came over the comm. "We're moving in." The drop shuttle detached from the Cerberus smoothly, its thrusters flaring as it moved toward the freighter. The crew inside the shuttle were silent, waiting for whatever came next. The ship loomed ahead, looking like an abandoned wreck, its hull battered and scarred from years of use. As the shuttle closed in, Watrous' heart skipped a beat. Without warning, the freighter's engines flared to life. Power spike. They're charging their FTL engines. Carbonell's voice rang through the comms. Watro's eyes widened. They're trying to run. Shut them down, he barked. The Cerberus fired a timed graviton pulse. The shockwave rippled through space, targeting the freighter's FTL systems. The pulse hit with precision, collapsing the FTL field before it could fully form. The freighter bucked violently, its engine sputtering as the power was cut. The ship drifted once again, disabled. Target disabled. They're dead in the water, Carbonell confirmed. Board them, Watros ordered, his voice tight with tension. Get the team on there. I want a full inspection, and I want answers. The shuttle locked onto the freighter's hull, and the boarding team made their way inside. Watros watched from the observation deck, his fingers tapping anxiously against the railing. He had no idea what they would find inside that ship, but he knew one thing for sure. It wasn't going to be simple. Whatever this freighter had been through, it was far from ordinary. The silence that followed was deafening. Watro's gut told him this was only the beginning. The silence on the comms lasted far too long. Captain Henry Watros stood at the observation deck, staring at the holofeed showing the boarding team's progress. His hands clenched into fists. The crew was trained for situations like this, but the unknown ship, this freighter, had already defied every expectation. He wasn't about to let something slip through their fingers now. Commander Ferlin, report, Watros demanded. His voice echoed through the silent bridge, sharp and demanding. The tension was thick. Still nothing. He exchanged a brief, uncertain glance with Lieutenant Carbonell. She had been monitoring the sensor feeds, trying to make sense of the strange vessel, but even she couldn't explain what was going on. It was almost as if the freighter had swallowed their communications. Keep trying to reach them, Watros said, his tone steely. Sir, there's a strange anomaly in the freighter's signal, Carbonell replied, her voice strained. It's like their systems are interfering with ours. Or maybe they're jamming us. Watros' frown deepened. If it was a jamming signal, that meant the ship had advanced technology, something more than just a run-of-the-mill freighter. Smugglers didn't typically have that kind of equipment, and even pirate ships didn't bother with high-end tech like this. It made no sense. The puzzle pieces weren't fitting. Minutes passed like hours, and the atmosphere on the bridge grew heavier by the second. Watros stood, pacing back and forth, his thoughts racing. Every instinct he had screamed at him that they were walking into a trap. But there was no turning back now. Finally, a crackling voice came over the comms, and Watros froze. Captain, this is Ferlin. We've breached the freighter. Relief flooded Watros' chest, but the commander's next words stopped him cold. There's something wrong. It's empty. There are no signs of life aboard, but the ship's systems are still running, just enough to keep it moving. We found something in the cargo hold. You're going to want to see this. On my way, Watros responded, his voice barely above a whisper. He knew what this meant. They had to board it, find out what was hidden inside. He motioned to the bridge crew to prepare for whatever was next. There was no telling what secrets the freighter held, but one thing was certain. The answers were somewhere inside. The Cerberus maintained its position in space as Watros suited up for the boarding operation. The crew scrambled to prepare, securing weapons and communications gear. Watros knew the danger wasn't over yet, and he was ready to confront whatever awaited them on that hauntingly silent freighter. As the captain boarded the shuttle with Ferlin's team, the ship's bulk loomed closer. The outer hull was scarred, blackened, and patched with layers of makeshift repairs, signs of past battles. It was clear the freighter had seen conflict, but the absence of life aboard made it seem like a ghost ship now. The shuttle clamped onto the freighter's airlock with a loud clang. The doors opened, and Watros was the first to step into the dark, abandoned halls of the freighter. The silence was suffocating. There was no hum of life support systems, no sounds of machinery. Only a low, mechanical whirring in the background as the ship's power flickered on and off sporadically. Stay alert, Watros ordered, his voice echoing in the stillness. The crew's footsteps reverberated through the empty corridors as they cautiously advanced. They made their way to the cargo hold, where Ferlin had reported a strange find. The heavy door groaned as it opened, revealing the vast chamber filled with crates and containers stacked high. But it wasn't the crates that grabbed Watro's attention. It was the large metallic object sitting at the center of the room. It looked like a capsule, though its design was unlike anything Watros had ever seen. Its surface was smooth and polished, almost too perfect, and there were strange symbols etched into the sides, alien markings that didn't match any known galactic language. "What is this?" Watros muttered under his breath, stepping closer to the object. "This doesn't look like anything we've encountered before," Ferlin said, his voice tight with concern. "Could it be some kind of weapon?" Watros hesitated, studying the strange object. "We'll find out soon enough." The crew continued their examination, scanning the capsule with every tool at their disposal. Watro's mind was racing. Why was this here? How did it get onto a freighter of this age? And why hadn't anyone been aboard to explain what it was? As they continued searching, Watro's gaze was drawn to a series of shattered panels along the walls, scraps of broken technology that looked like they'd been forcibly removed. Something about the damage seemed deliberate, like someone had tried to hide something. "We're not alone here," Ferlin said quietly, his voice tense. "Captain, I think this ship was stripped for a reason. There's more to this than just an abandoned freighter." Watros nodded slowly, his gut telling him the same thing. They were walking into something far bigger than they'd anticipated. And now that they'd found the capsule, there was no turning back. The darkness was suffocating. Captain Watros stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear his crew's breathing, each breath a sharp reminder of the eerie stillness around them. The faint glow from the capsule was the only thing that cut through the pitch-black void of the freighter. But it too was dimming, flickering like a candle struggling to stay alight. "What happened?" Ferlin's voice echoed in the void. "Did the power just go out?" Watros didn't respond immediately. His mind raced. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. The freighter had been inactive, almost lifeless, until they'd disturbed it. And now, this. He wasn't sure what they had awoken, but the ship's eerie quiet had been replaced by a strange, ominous hum. "Keep your weapons ready," Watros ordered, his voice steady despite the rising tension. He reached for his comm device, but found that it was dead. The communication lines were down. That was not good. His eyes scanned the dark corridor around them. The temperature was steadily dropping. If the life support systems were failing, it wouldn't be long before they were in danger. But there was more than just the cold to worry about. The presence of something unknown, something ancient and powerful, hung in the air. Suddenly, a loud clang echoed from somewhere deep inside the ship. The sound of metal scraping against metal. Watro's grip tightened on his rifle as he motioned for his team to move. "We need to find the power core and restart the systems. We'll be sitting ducks if we don't," he said. The team nodded and started to advance cautiously, their footsteps muffled in the thick silence of the ship's empty halls. But there was an unsettling sense that they were no longer alone. Watros had the distinct feeling that they were being watched closely. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every creak of the ship felt like it was moving closer. "Captain," Carbonell's voice came from behind him, sharp and tense. "The capsule. It's moving." "What?" Watros turned sharply, his eyes snapping back to the cargo hold. The glowing capsule had shifted, its metallic surface rippling, as if something inside was trying to escape. The light from the capsule grew brighter, then faded again, flickering in and out like a heartbeat. Before anyone could react, there was another sharp crack, louder than the last. The capsule's surface split open, and a low growl echoed from within the dark interior. It was alive. A cold shiver ran down Watros's spine. He stepped forward slowly, instinctively reaching for his weapon. But it wasn't enough to prepare him for what he was about to see. The hatch opened wider, and a figure emerged from the capsule. It was humanoid, but nothing like anything Watros had ever encountered. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, with a faint, unnatural glow that matched the light from the capsule. Its eyes, wide, black and hollow, stared directly at Watros, as though it had been waiting for him. Its movements were slow, deliberate, as if it had just awakened from a deep, long sleep. "Is it alive?" Ferlin whispered in disbelief, his voice strained. Watros took a step back, but he couldn't take his eyes off the figure. The creature seemed to have no interest in the humans at first. It just stood there, taking in its surroundings, scanning them with eerie, unblinking eyes. But then, without warning, it spoke. Its voice was not like any language Watros had ever heard. It was like a mixture of clicks, growls, and a hiss that vibrated through the air, making the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Carbonell was the first to react, raising her rifle. "We need to neutralize it," she said, her voice shaking. "Wait," Watros ordered. He held up his hand, trying to make sense of the situation. There was something about the creature. It wasn't attacking. Not yet, but that didn't mean it wouldn't. The creature's eyes darted toward them, and Watros could feel the intensity of its gaze, a chilling, intelligent presence staring right at him. It knew exactly what was happening. Another growl vibrated through the freighter, this one lower, deeper. The creature's hand twitched. Watros didn't know whether to fire or run, but his instincts screamed at him to wait. They had no idea what this thing was, and if they made the wrong move, they could end up dead. "Captain," Ferlin said urgently, "we don't have much time. That thing is waking up." The growling intensified, but now there was something more. The creature's mouth opened, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth, unlike anything seen before. Watros felt his blood run cold. It wasn't just waking up. It was hungry. Without warning, the creature lunged. Its speed was impossible, faster than any human could react. It was a blur of motion, and the next thing Watros knew, one of his Marines was on the ground, the creature's claws buried deep into his chest. "Fire!" Watros yelled. The gunfire erupted, deafening in the close quarters of the freighter. The creature recoiled, its dark eyes flaring with anger. But it wasn't enough. The bullets didn't seem to faze it. It shrieked in a horrible, inhuman sound, its skin beginning to shimmer with energy, glowing brighter by the second. "Get back!" Watros shouted, but it was already too late. The creature's body expanded, the energy building until it released a pulse of force that sent the team flying back. Watros struggled to regain his footing, his vision spinning. When he looked up again, the creature was gone, vanished into the shadows. His heart hammered in his chest as he wiped the blood from his face, struggling to breathe. "What the hell was that?" Carbonell whispered, her voice trembling with fear. "I don't know," Watros muttered, "but we're going to find out." The freighter's corridors were now filled with an eerie silence. The hum of the ship's failing systems, the distant clanking of metal, and the faintest echoes of something moving in the shadows. Everything felt like it was closing in on them. Watros could still feel the pounding of his heart in his ears as he regrouped with his team. The attack had come so suddenly, so violently, that it left them all in a daze. The creature's power was unlike anything they had encountered before, and it was clear they were no longer dealing with an ordinary threat. "Move out," Watros ordered, his voice steady but strained. The crew, despite their fear, followed his command. They had no choice. Their lives depended on it now. The tight passageways of the freighter seemed to stretch on forever, twisting and turning in ways that didn't make sense. Watros had seen countless ships in his career, but this one was different. It was as though the very ship itself was designed to confuse and disorient them. The walls seemed to shift, or perhaps it was just the fear making them second-guess everything they saw. "Captain, we need to find that power core," Carbonell said, her voice edged with urgency. "The longer we stay here, the worse it's going to get." "I know," Watros replied, his eyes scanning the darkened corners of the corridor. He was starting to feel like the walls were closing in on him. But we can't just rush in blind. We need answers, and fast. As they moved deeper into the freighter, they came upon a set of heavy doors, marked with a warning that only heightened Watros's suspicions. The door had been scratched and dented as if something, or someone, had tried to force it open from the inside. "Prepare yourselves," Watros said quietly. He motioned to Ferlin and Carbonell, signaling for them to take positions. With a deep breath, Watros placed his hand on the door's control panel. The door slid open with a groan, revealing a massive chamber beyond. The room was filled with strange, alien machinery, pulsating with an unnatural light. But it wasn't the machines that caught Watros' attention. It was the figure standing in the center of the room. A tall, shadowy figure. Cloaked in darkness, it barely seemed to belong to the ship. It stood motionless, its form barely visible in the dim light. But Watros knew instantly that this was the being responsible for the destruction of the Marines. He could feel its gaze, even though it was obscured by shadows. Before Watros could issue another command, the creature spoke. Its voice was low, distorted, and yet somehow familiar. "You are not welcome here," it rasped, its words sending chills down Watros's spine. "This ship belongs to us." "Who are you?" Watros demanded, trying to mask the rising fear in his voice. The creature took a slow step forward, and the air seemed to thicken around it, heavy with something ancient, something powerful. "I am the last of my kind," the creature said. "And this ship, this vessel is my tomb. You have awoken me from centuries of slumber, and now you will pay the price." Watros's eyes narrowed. This wasn't just some rogue alien. It was something far older, far more dangerous. The creature's body shimmered, revealing hints of its true form. Its skin, like liquid metal, undulated as it stepped closer. Suddenly, the room shook violently, the walls vibrating as if the ship itself was waking from a long, troubled sleep. Watros grabbed onto the console in front of him, trying to steady himself. "What's happening?" he shouted. The creature smiled, a cruel twist of its jagged features. "The ship is responding to me. It has been waiting for me, just as you have been waiting for death." Without warning, the floor beneath them cracked, and a massive energy pulse shot through the room. Watros barely managed to dive to the side as the blast sent debris flying. He looked up just in time to see the creature moving with terrifying speed, darting toward the group with claws extended. "Fall back," Watros shouted. The team scattered, but they were too slow. The creature was upon them before they could react. It moved like a blur, faster than anything Watros had ever seen, its claws slashing through the air. Ferlin fired his weapon, but the creature deflected the shots with ease, its body shimmering and warping around the energy blasts. It was like fighting against a shadow. No matter how hard they tried, their attacks had no effect. "Keep moving," Watros yelled, pushing his crew back toward the door. They needed to get out of there, and fast. But as they retreated, the creature didn't follow. It just stood there, watching them, as if it was toying with them. "We can't win this fight," Carbonell gasped, still trying to steady herself. "Not like this." "We don't need to win," Watros said, his eyes scanning the room for a way out. "We just need to survive." The walls of the chamber started to crack and groan as if the ship itself was reacting to the creature's presence. The very air around them seemed to warp and distort, creating an oppressive pressure that made it difficult to breathe. "We need to find the power core," Watros repeated, his voice strained. "If we can get the systems back online, we might be able to shut this thing down." "Where do we start?" Ferlin asked, his eyes darting around. "Follow me," Watros said, leading them toward a narrow passageway that led deeper into the ship. The creature had stopped chasing them for now, but they all knew it wasn't over. The question was no longer whether they could defeat the creature. It was whether they could survive long enough to escape. The darkness was absolute. The hum of the ship's systems had completely died. leaving only the sound of their breathing and the faintest shuffle of boots on the cold, metallic floor. Watros cursed under his breath, trying to make out any shapes in the pitch black. The freighter had been quiet for a moment, but that only made it more sinister. There was something unnatural about the silence, something that made Watros' skin crawl. "Stay close," Watros ordered, his voice low and urgent. The crew obeyed, pulling together into a tight group. They had to move, but they couldn't afford to make any noise. Whatever had attacked them before might still be lurking. "I don't like this," Carbonell muttered, her hand resting on her weapon, ready for anything. "It's like the whole ship is holding its breath." Ferlin, always the calm one, kept his eyes trained on the surrounding walls. "We need to find the power core. If we can get the ship's systems back online, we can maybe fight back." "Exactly," Watros agreed. "But we don't know how much time we have before the creature or whatever this thing is decides to finish what it started." Just as he spoke, the faintest glimmer of light flickered in the distance, drawing their attention. It was weak at first, like the flickering of a dying candle, but it grew steadily brighter until it illuminated the dark corridor ahead. Watros motioned for the team to advance cautiously, weapons drawn. They moved in a tight formation, each step echoing in the stillness, until they came upon a large chamber. The light was now shining from a series of glowing panels embedded in the walls, alien technology beyond anything Watros had ever seen. "It's the control room," Carbonell whispered in awe. "This is where the ship's power is regulated." Watros approached the central console. It was a massive structure, its surface covered in strange symbols that seemed to shift when you looked at them too long. The ship's AI, still dormant, had likely been deactivated by the creature. They would have to power everything back on manually. "Can we get this thing working?" Ferlin asked, his voice full of skepticism. He knew that most of the crew had never worked with alien tech like this before. "We don't have much choice," Watros replied. "We need to try." He reached out and placed his hand on one of the glowing panels. Instantly, a pulse of energy shot through the room, causing the entire chamber to vibrate. For a moment, the crew thought it was going to explode, but then the lights flickered back on, and the hum of the ship's systems slowly returned. "Captain, look," Carbonell shouted, pointing to a bank of screens above them. A map of the ship appeared on the central display, and a series of blinking red dots began to appear, marking positions across the vessel. It was a real-time map, showing their location in relation to the rest of the freighter. "Those must be the points of interest," Watros said, his mind working quickly. He examined the map, focusing on the farthest point away from their current position. It was a massive space, a core room where the main power source of the ship was located. If they could reach it, they might be able to shut the creature down, or at least keep it from doing any more damage. But as Watros studied the map, something caught his eye. A new red dot had appeared on the display, right near them. "Get down," Watros yelled as he instinctively grabbed Carbonell and shoved her behind a nearby pillar. The air seemed to freeze. There was no sound, but Watros could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The walls of the control room seemed to pulse with an energy of their own, as though the ship was alive and aware of their presence. The creature. Suddenly, the lights dimmed again, and the entire room was plunged into near darkness. Watros's pulse quickened, his mind racing for a plan. They had just gotten the systems back online, but it was clear that the creature was still one step ahead. "Where is it?" Ferlin whispered, his eyes darting around. "It's got to be close." Watros's eyes narrowed as he focused on the faintest movement across the room, shadows shifting and stretching unnaturally. Then, in a heartbeat, the creature appeared, its jagged form emerging from the darkness, its eyes glowing with an unearthly light. The creature's smile was cruel, its jagged teeth flashing as it slowly advanced toward them. "You think you can control this ship? You have no idea what you're dealing with." Before Watros could react, the ship's AI, now partially online, sent a surge of power to the walls. trapping the creature momentarily in a force field. "Now's our chance," Watros shouted. "Get to the power core." They bolted for the exit, moving as quickly as they could. The ship's system was slowly coming back to life, but the creature wasn't going down without a fight. As Watros and his crew rushed through the ship's corridors, the walls seemed to constrict, closing in on them. They weren't just running from the creature now. They were running from the ship itself, which had become a living, breathing entity, hell-bent on their destruction. The race against time was on. The power core was their only chance to survive, and they had to reach it before the ship and its dark guardian closed in for the kill. The door to the power core was sealed, and the crew was trapped. Watros banged his fist against the cold metal, frustration boiling over. The dark voice of the creature echoed from the other side, its mocking laughter filling the hallway. The walls trembled, and the low hum of the ship seemed to grow louder, as if it were responding to the creature's presence. "We're running out of time," Carbonell said, her voice tight with fear. "It knows we're here, and it's not going to stop until we're all dead." "We can't give up now," Watros replied, his tone firm, but the weight of the situation was becoming impossible to ignore. They had to act fast, or they would never make it out alive. The ship's AI flickered to life again, and a soft voice echoed through the corridor. "Warning. Core system breach detected. Security protocols engaged. Extermination mode activated." The walls vibrated more intensely now. Watros knew they didn't have much time before the ship went into full lockdown. They needed to find a way to override the system and open that door. If they couldn't, they would be stuck with nowhere to go, and with the creature hunting them down. "Back to the control room," Watros ordered. "We need to reset the security protocols. If we can get into the AI system, we might be able to stop this." Ferlin nodded, already moving. "I'll go first. Keep your weapons ready." The crew moved swiftly back through the darkened corridors. The air was thick with tension, every corner hiding a potential threat. As they approached the control room, the ship's systems seemed to grow more erratic. The lights flickered, and strange, mechanical noises echoed in the darkness, like the ship itself was alive and fighting back. "Almost there," Watros said, his eyes scanning the hall ahead. "Stay sharp." The control room door opened with a soft hiss, and they filed in, weapons drawn. The central console was still lit, but it was flickering, its once organized interface now displaying distorted data. The ship's AI, though partially active, had clearly been tampered with by the creature. "Get to the main terminal," Watros ordered, his voice urgent. "We need to shut down the lockdown and take control of the systems." Carbonell worked quickly, typing commands into the terminal. The screen flashed briefly with lines of code, then froze. "It's locked me out. This thing's fighting back." Suddenly, a deep guttural growl reverberated through the walls. Watros's blood ran cold. The creature was near, and it was angrier than ever. Its footsteps echoed from the hallway outside the control room, slow but deliberate. "We don't have much time," Ferlin muttered, his weapon aimed at the door, ready for anything. Watros looked at Carbonell. "Can you override it?" She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I can try, but I'm going to need a distraction." Watros turned to Ferlin. "Keep it distracted. We need to hold off the creature just long enough for Carbonell to get the system under control." Ferlin smirked grimly, stepping toward the door. "Understood." The door hissed open, and Ferlin stepped into the hallway, weapon at the ready. The creature's glowing eyes locked onto him almost immediately, its cruel smile widening as it advanced. Ferlin didn't hesitate. He fired a burst of energy at the creature, narrowly missing its shoulder. The shot only seemed to anger it more. "You think you can stop me?" The creature sneered, its voice dripping with malice. Ferlin backed into the control room, his gun still trained on the beast. "Just keep moving, Carbonell." Inside the control room, Carbonell's fingers flew over the keyboard, hacking into the ship's systems as fast as she could. The AI fought back, sending shock pulses through the console, causing sparks to fly. But Carbonell was relentless. She refused to give up. Almost there, she shouted over her shoulder. Watros didn't have time to check on her progress. He could hear the creature's growls growing louder, feel its presence getting closer. His team was counting on him. They were running out of options. Outside the control room, the creature lunged at Ferlin, slamming him against the wall with a sickening thud. The impact knocked the air from his lungs, but he didn't stop fighting. He struggled to regain his footing and fired another blast of energy, hitting the creature square in the chest. It recoiled slightly, but then its eyes glowed even brighter. "Is that the best you've got?" it mocked. Ferlin gritted his teeth, refusing to let the creature intimidate him. "You're not going to win this." But then, just as the creature lunged for him again, the sound of a familiar beeping filled the room. Carbonell had done it. The systems flickered and whirred, and the control room door slid shut with a resounding clang, locking the creature out. "We're in," Carbonell yelled, breathing a sigh of relief. For a moment, the crew stood in silence, catching their breath. But the victory was short-lived. The creature wasn't gone. It was just biding its time, waiting for its next move. "Now we go for the power core," Watros said, his eyes steely with determination. "Let's finish this." The crew nodded, weapons raised, ready for the final battle. They couldn't stop now. Not when they were so close. The power core room loomed ahead, the cold metallic walls reflecting the dim emergency lights. Every footstep felt heavier as the crew marched forward, their senses on high alert. The creature was still out there, and they knew this was where it would all come to a head. The ship's pulse felt frantic, as if it were breathing in panic, and the low hum of its systems echoed through the hallways like a warning. Watros led the way, his hand tight on his weapon, his eyes scanning the hallway for any movement. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that the creature had something far more dangerous planned. The AI had been compromised, and now it seemed as if even the ship itself had become an enemy. "Watch your corners," Watros ordered, his voice steady but tense. Carbonell followed closely, fingers still twitching nervously near her gun, her mind replaying every failed attempt they had made to escape. Ferlin stayed just behind her, his gaze flickering back and forth, watching for any signs of the creature. The power core room came into view. It was a large, open space, its walls lined with conduits and reactors, the hum of energy reverberating through the room. But it wasn't the machinery that made their blood run cold. It was the figure standing in the center of the room. The creature. It stood tall, its dark eyes glinting with malice. A twisted grin spread across its face as it stared at them, its breath coming in slow, deliberate hisses. "You've come all this way," it mocked, its voice a low growl. "But do you really think you can stop me?" The crew froze. The tension was palpable. Watros's heart raced, but his mind remained sharp. This was it. They couldn't back down now. The fate of everyone in the fleet, and possibly beyond, rested on this moment. "Open fire," Watros shouted. The team didn't hesitate. Ferlin and Carbonell unleashed a barrage of shots, their weapons lighting up the room with blinding flashes of energy. But the creature was fast, darting around the room with inhuman agility. It ducked, dodged, and twisted out of the way with terrifying speed, each movement filled with predatory grace. The blasts hit nothing but air, and the creature's laughter echoed, taunting them. "Is that all you've got?" Watros's eyes narrowed. He knew they couldn't win with brute force alone. They needed to be smarter, faster. The creature was playing with them, testing their limits. It wasn't just trying to kill them, it was trying to break them. "Switch to thermal," Watros ordered. Carbonell quickly adjusted her weapon, switching it to a different setting. She fired again, this time at a different angle. A hit. The creature's smile faltered, and for the first time, it seemed to flinch. But it recovered almost immediately, lunging toward them in a flash. Ferlin moved to intercept it, his own weapon ready, but the creature was too fast. It slashed at him, knocking him aside with a single swipe. He hit the ground hard, but quickly regained his footing, pain flashing through his body. The creature didn't give him time to breathe, lunging for him again, its claws outstretched. "Move!" Watros yelled, firing at the creature to draw its attention. The creature snarled, its eyes glowing. It spun around, locking eyes with Watros. "You cannot stop me. I am beyond your control." But Watros wasn't listening. He was already moving, making a dash for the power core. He had a plan, and it wasn't going to be easy, but it was their only shot. "Carbonel, get to the console," Watros shouted as he ran toward the central control panel. "I need you to overload the core's power systems. Now." Carbonel hesitated for a moment, then sprinted toward the console, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she bypassed the security systems. The creature, realizing what they were doing, turned to face her, its eyes burning with fury. "No," it screeched. "You cannot escape me." But it was too late. Carbonel hit the final command, sending a surge of energy into the core. The room was immediately flooded with blinding light. Sparks flew from the walls, and the creature screamed in rage as the systems overloaded. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the air was filled with the sound of grinding metal. The power core was going critical. "Get out of here," Watros yelled, grabbing Ferlin and pulling him toward the exit. Now, they didn't need to be told twice. Carbonel was already ahead of them, her face set with determination. The creature roared behind them, but it was no match for the energy building in the power core. The walls were shaking, and the entire ship seemed to be coming apart. The crew ran, knowing they had seconds, maybe less, to escape. As they reached the exit, the ship's hull buckled, sending them tumbling to the ground. Watros grabbed a nearby rail to steady himself, looking back just in time to see the entire power core room explode in a wave of energy. The ship shuddered violently, then went silent. "We did it," Carbonel gasped, breathless, staring at the wreckage in disbelief. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, slowly, the AI's voice returned, softer this time. "Critical threat neutralized. Power core instability contained." Watros nodded, his chest heaving with exertion. "We're not out of this yet, but we've won the first battle." The crew looked at each other, relief washing over them. But they knew the fight was far from over. Whatever had been behind this attack was still out there, waiting, and Earth was counting on them to finish what they had started.